So the question I then found myself asking, why are we contriving supernatural situations within which to sexualize children? Before we get going, I do want to issue a trigger warning for this video. There's some topics in here which might be a bit too much for some people. In media, we're going to be discussing the sexualization of children and death in childbirth. And in real world examples, we're going to be discussing public sexual harassment of children. We're going to be discussing real world examples of child abuse, only very briefly, and just in general, the sexualization of children. So if those topics are a bit too heavy for you, or you're not in the right place to be watching this right now, I won't resent you at all if you have to switch off. Do whatever's best for your mental health. But if you do decide to stay, I do think there is going to be some interesting topics for discussion in here. So I really hope you enjoy the video. Baxter, mate, it looks like you're in absolute paradise right now. Looks like you're having the time of your life. Unlike me, who had to watch Old, directed by M. Night Shyamalan. I'll briefly explain the premise of the film for those who haven't seen it. The characters find themselves on a secluded beach, and on this beach, they find that their bodies are aging incredibly rapidly. It's important to make the distinction that time isn't moving more quickly, time is moving the same rate as it does for everybody else. It is only their bodies that are aging rapidly. That is going to be very important in a moment. Within the logic of the film, all the events on the beach take place within about 24 hours. It might feel like throughout the video I'm labouring this point quite a lot, but they experience, they learn, and the characters interact at a normal rate. Time isn't moving more quickly, their bodies are aging quickly. If we meet the logic of the film on its own terms, the children who begin the film at ages 6, and 11 also end the film at the ages of 6, and 11. Functionally, no time has passed. At this point, I'm going to make a distinction between the two 6-year-olds and the 11-year-old, because there are specific points I want to make which refer to those separate groups. Now, I'm going to begin by talking about the 11-year-old girl. All the kids notice, within a few hours of being on the beach, that they're too big for their clothes. I want to talk about something called the willing suspension of disbelief. Now, if you're watching a really good play, you aren't thinking about the lighting direction. You aren't thinking that they're actors on the stage. You aren't thinking that you're sat in an audience. You are completely engaged with what's happening on stage. This goes for film and television as well. One of the consequences of this sort of necessary component of enjoying media is that we often don't think about the decisions that are being made by the creators of those pieces of media. The creators of this film decided to put the children in swimsuits. They made that decision. That isn't an inevitable consequence of being on a beach. Many of the other characters are fully clothed. And once the 11-year-old girl starts taking on more developed physical features typically associated with adulthood in humans, she puts on a more revealing bikini. Now, I really want to labour this point. This is a decision that was made by the creators of this film. A different decision could have been made at any point during the creative process. Instead, they made a point of taking this 11-year-old who had more developed physical features and putting her in a more sexualized item of clothing. Hello everybody, it's Sam from the future here. I'm currently editing the video that you're watching, so that's pretty exciting. I thought it would be good for me to jump in now and clarify a point that I go on to make later on. It's probably pretty obvious that my opinion on the matter is that I think that everybody should be able to wear whatever they want. Sadly, we don't live in that world. We live in a cultural hegemony that is obsessed with nakedness and, more relevantly, has a laser focus on commodifying and objectifying the female body. So when we are talking about this film cannot responsibly be addressed in isolation. it must be addressed in context of a culture that has an agenda to profit from the sexualization of women, and a culture that we know is dangerous for women. So when I make a point that a character is wearing this, that, or the other, it is not in isolation that I say that. It is in context, and we are addressing the intent of the people making it and the consequences of those people's decisions when it meets culture at large. Oh, but their bodies are aging, so that means it's fine. It's nothing like this happens in real life. I wish that were true. I wish that were true. Earlier this year in the UK, a lady went missing by the name of Sarah Everett. She was walking home late at night and she didn't make it to where she was going. Eventually, she was found. She had been killed. What's more, she'd been killed by a member of the Metropolitan Police. And around that time, I started following this page called Our Streets Now on Instagram. And on that page, they share a lot of first-hand testimony of women and people from minority groups and their experiences in real life. And I was flabbergasted at the amount of young, very young women who came forward and said, I have been publicly sexually harassed in my school uniform from as young as like the age of 8. So to have this 11-year-old have a more mature physical body, have these physical attributes that are typically associated with biological reproductive maturity, and then for her to have a bikini put on, it strikes too close to home. It seems insane. Like, why would those things take place? It's because we're in a culture where these things aren't just allowed for, but kind of glorified in media. I want to highlight the point that puberty can begin as early as like 10 or 11. And we have first-hand testimony of people that young being publicly sexually harassed. Now, it's really important at this point that we differentiate between physical attributes that a person may have and their ability to consent. Or perhaps more broadly, just their age. There's a reason why we have an age of consent rather than a physical properties which mean you can consent. And I think if this video were to have a sort of thesis statement, the thesis statement would be, now we are all told from every direction, but more specifically, young women are told from every direction. If you have the physical features that even vaguely resemble the cultural idea of sexual maturity, you are fair game. You are fair game to have your body commented on. You are fair game to be sexualized. You are fair game to have your looks criticized, to have them fawned over. How do those ideas get to the point where people think they're acceptable, let alone, encourageable? And it's because of instances like this where people haven't thought closely about what they're actually doing. These creators decided to have this take place. They decided to have the kids be in swimsuits. They decided to put her in a more revealing swimsuit. Those are decisions that were made that didn't have to be made that way. They could have not had kids in it at all. You know what I mean? Children should be able to live their lives free from sexualization. They should be able to wear whatever they want. But if we're ever going to get to that point, we've got a lot of hard work in front of us. Now, before we get on to the 2 6-year-olds, I want to reiterate the logic of the film. The beach makes people's bodies age more quickly. The events of the film that take place on the beach take place over about 24 hours. The characters are the same age when they enter the beach as they are when they leave the beach. And to make this really, really clear, they learn, they experience, and they interact with the other characters at a normal rate. It is just their bodies that are aging more quickly. Now, if it seems like I'm being really specific about this and really hammering this point, it's because I want to be meticulous. I want to be meticulous because I want to be appropriately furious about the events that I'm going to describe to you now. There are two 6-year-old kids, one of whom is male, one of whom is female. Now, you can already probably tell where this is going. Now, these two characters sequestered themselves away in a tent, all on their lonesome. And the way this is shot, I think a lot of people could tell what was going to happen next, and then by the subject matter they were talking about as well. But to make a long story short, they emerge and the young lady is pregnant. I'm saying a young lady, she's 6 years old, the child is pregnant. Now, when this character emerged on screen, this 6-year-old with a really big tummy, the people in the cinema that I was in, now this wasn't an empty cinema, this was a fairly full cinema, but it erupted into laughter. And I remember shouting, not shouting, but saying fairly loudly, like, it isn't funny. I was so, disgusted by what I was seeing on the screen. So this 6-year-old then proceeds to give birth, which is a harrowing thing to have to experience on a big screen. But don't worry, guys, the baby isn't around for long. Why did they put this in the film? Why did they put this in? It sort of like happens and it's wrapped up and then what? Why did they make this decision? Like I say, I'm going to keep emphasising, this was a creative decision made by the creators of this film. Now, Sam, why are you worried about this? This is plainly fantasy. A 6-year-old can't give birth. It's not like anything like this has ever happened in IRL life. It's not like there's a whole Wikipedia list of these kind of things. That would just be patently absurd. I wish you were right, Devil's Avocado. I wish you were right. Now, I really don't want to have to go into any more detail on this than I have to. That being said, I will leave some Wikipedia links in the description if you want to look at what I looked at. All I will say that the youngest person ever to have given birth was 5 years old, 7 months, and 21 days old. This is the thing, I cannot comprehend why the creators of this film decided to put this in. I genuinely feel like I'm going nuts. Like, why am I sitting here having to make a video arguing why putting these elements in a film is fucked up? Why am I having to do this? This film had a budget of $18 million, and not one person decided to stand up and go, guys, genuinely, this is messed up. We shouldn't put this in a film. There's so many things you can make films about, but to put it in this sort of like fantasy film as a sort of like fun aside, like, what the fuck? What the fuck? Fuck you, M. Night Shyamalan, you're a cunt. This isn't a fun little, adventure. These things happen in real life. The child is conceived, grows to gestation, is given birth to, and then fucking dies within the space of about 5 minutes. They could have completely cut it from the film, and the film would have been the fucking same. I shit you not. There's a couple of lines later on, and there's one scene where the child is literally bones. How fucked up is that? Why am I feel like I'm going insane. This is what I'm talking about. I feel like I'm going insane. Why do I have to explain this? Now, I am having to contend with these things because they didn't. They couldn't be arsed thinking about it for 2 minutes. God, £18 million, just give it to me. I'll make a film with absolutely no child abuse in it. I could do that with probably just, about 40 quid. Now, more recently than seeing Old, I watched a animated superhero program called What was that? Now, in the show, what is that's actually scaring me? Now, to give a brief overview of interesting shows like this, there's superheroes. Now, there's one character in particular who's based on the character of the Hulk, called Monster Girl. Now, Monster Girl has been cursed every time she turns into this Hulk-like creature, she ages in reverse. She gets younger. In real terms, she's 24 years old, but she appears to have the body of a child. Now there's this other character called Robot, who isn't actually a robot, it's a person controlling robots. And this person seems to have numerous disabilities, which makes their life extremely difficult. But this character... Okay, so this character is in love with Monster Girl. Now, alright, she's 24 years old. They got a body of a kid, but they're 24 years old. Okay, I'm not happy thus far, but don't worry, it gets worse. This character of Robot decides to make themselves a new body. Do they make themselves the body of someone who is the age that they are? No. Why would they do that? They make themselves the body of a child, so that they can be with Monster Girl. I'd say luckily, but luckily the characters in the show are like, dude, that's really fucked up when this guy shows up and he's got the body of a child. But the show doesn't do anything about it. So the question I then found myself asking after I'd watched that and after having watched Old, why are we contriving supernatural situations within which to sexualize children? Now, you might argue in Invincible, like, Monster Girl isn't sexualized, but we've got a character which has fallen in love with this character who's a kid. Now, yes, I'm aware that there are certain medical conditions which can prevent people from going through puberty. They can appear to be a child later into their life. And people can go through puberty and still have sort of like childlike attributes as well. I'm not talking about those extremely valid real-life situations. Because what more likely is to recur in real life is for older people. Now, I acknowledge that they are both in their 20s. They are of similar age. I acknowledge that. But again, why are we contriving supernatural situations within which to have adult interactions with children? Whether they be children whose bodies are aged up or adults whose bodies are aged down. At the end of the day, we're dealing with two separate aspects of juvenility. Why are we doing it? Why are we bothering? Why is this a plot point? Why have the creators of this made this extremely, like, big monkey finger, scratch top of head, this really makes one think situation in which the consequence is adult interactions with someone with the body of a child, or vice versa in Old? Why are these premises being written? Of any premise, if that's a premise you can write, why are you not doing a different one which is equally absurd and less harmful to people who actually live on planet Earth? Do you get why I feel like I'm going insane? In this realm of infinite possibility in which you can have a situation in which there's a curse that makes someone age backwards, why don't you have a curse in which someone's leg gets longer? And the thing that's different about them is their leg gets really long. Isn't that just as intellectually nourishing as someone who gets their body gets younger as they turn into a thing? That genuinely seems like a contrivance to justify harm towards children. Now, there are dozens of fantastic posts on the Our Streets Now Instagram page, and I deeply recommend you go and follow them, or at least peruse through, because you will learn so much about the experience of people that you might not have considered before, and might even realise they're even happening. But there is one post in particular that really stood out to me and really resonated with me. It describes a pyramid of sexual violence. At the bottom of this pyramid, we've got things such as unsolicited sexual conversation, public sexual harassment, fair enough, and that is on the normalisation tier. These things normalise the things that are above. At the bottom, it describes tolerance of the behaviours at the bottom excuse those higher up. If we tolerate these things, it facilitates unwanted touching, upskirting, revenge porn, stalking, flashing, exposing, intimidation, those things that take place on the degradation tier. And at the top, we've got the assault tier. We've got rape. We've got drugging. We've got molestation. Now, I'd argue there's a layer below normalisation as well. One that's best described by the broad understanding of the word culture. The films we watch, the music we listen to, the conversations we have, the interactions we have with other people, the art we consume, all of these things create an atmosphere through which actions can take place. Because the things that we consume facilitate those actions. We see them in the media that we consume. And we'd all like to think that we are mature enough, we are smart enough to see through these things. But like I say, we willingly suspend our disbelief when we go into these films. We willingly suspend our disbelief when we watch a play, when we listen to music, anything where we want to feel ourselves within a story. We expose our soul. So when we see these things, they sneak past our defences. And unfortunately, not everybody is as analytic as some of us might be. And you know what? It's not really their responsibility to be. You know, some people are better at it than others. So why, oh why, are we accepting these, like I described earlier, these contrivances that allow for the sexualization of children to even be in our films? Because when we allow that culture, we start allowing the bottom of the pyramid of actions. And I'd like to, at this point, reiterate the sort of thesis statement that I described earlier. And it goes, if you have the physical qualities that vaguely resemble the cultural idea of sexual maturity, you're fair game. You're fair game to be commented on, you're fair game to be criticised, you're fair game to be sexualised. Doesn't matter how old you are, doesn't matter how young you look. And that's something that we as a community need to destroy. Because if we don't, guess what? There's just more of the same to come. More of the same, and if not worse, because the more we allow it to grow, the worse it gets. Media never comes out and goes, sexualization of children is good and fine. It will never come out and say that directly to you, but it will sneak it in films like this, in instances like this. And there's no excuse for it. There's no, it's an interesting theoretical situation. No, it isn't interesting. It doesn't bear thinking about, actually. There is nothing nourishing about it. The same themes you can explore through that. These themes that in Invincible, they're arguing, oh, I know what it feels like to be trapped in a body which isn't yours. You can do that in other ways. She could have that 24-year-old woman could be steadily turning into a frog. That way you don't have that 24-year-old person with the body of a child interacting with adult themes. You don't even have to consider it. That's the exact same theme that they're talking about. Thank you very much, and also congratulations for making it to the end of this video. If you did enjoy it, please give it a like, it really helps out. If you enjoy watching content like this, please subscribe, there's going to be more on the way. If you feel like you have someone in your life who would enjoy this video as well, please feel free to share it to them, I'd really appreciate that. And I'll see you in the next one. And do me a favour, guys. Be good.